What's up, nerds? My name's Corey Bergeron. You're watching Corey Bergeron Recordings, and we're back with a brand new video. In this video, I'm going to talk about my mix prep checklist. A few weeks ago, I released a video talking about my mix template, and people seem to really enjoy it, and I think they found value in it. So I thought I would make another video just kind of going into the process of how I mix tracks, and I think you might learn something. So I wrote something down here. Any experienced mixing engineer would tell you that the quality of the recordings and the performances and how the track is arranged directly influence the quality of mix that mixing engineer can deliver. Does that make sense? If you receive files and those files are 10 different guitars that are all out of tune and out of time and then one poorly recorded vocal, you can EQ it however you want, but ultimately that is limiting your ability to deliver a high quality competitive mix. So, on a week-to-week basis, I receive like a wide spectrum of different quality multi-tracks and productions to mix. And the one thing that is the same between all of them is that I have to deliver a competitive mix. So this mix prep checklist essentially addresses everything in the production. So by the time I open it up and I'm mixing it, all I have to do is mix and make creative decisions that serve the song best. I hope that made sense. So let's jump into my mix prep checklist. This is a checklist that I created with my friend Taylor. Taylor was doing a bunch of mix prepping for me. So over time, we just kind of organized it into a system, and this is the system. So let me break it down for you. The first thing I have written down here is leave notes of what you did with the goal of sending it to the client so they can improve their productions, plus minimize our time fixing their errors. So this is a note for Taylor, specifically for Taylor, being like, yo, if you see the same common issues, shoot me a message so I can send that to the client, pass that on, because a lot of people that we work with are repeat clients, and we can essentially waste less of our time, less of their time, and create a better production. It's a win for everyone. Let's jump down here to general. So the first thing is title the Pro Tool session by the song name, and then -mix, and then save as the session and call it mix prep. So we do all the mix prepping in a session that is the song name -mix prep. Then I'll get Taylor to import all the files that were delivered. The entire multi-track goes into the Pro Tool session, and we have a color coding system, so we just color code the tracks. I live in Canada. This is how we spell color. The next step is to line up the rough mix that was provided with the multi-track. And the reason we do this is because when I'm mixing, I can press one button over here, and I can be listening to my mix in real time, playing through, and then I can press a button, and boom, I'm listening to the rough mix. And that gives me a lot of insightful information quickly, and it's important that it's lined up because I want that information quickly. So when I'm, let's say, mixing a bridge, and I'm like, I have no idea what the client's intention was here, I can press a button and go, oh, this vocal is supposed to have a ton of reverb on it. Now it makes sense. And then I can make decisions based on that. This is an organization thing here, but I don't like when there's like prefixes or track numbers or song names in an audio file. So for example, like song name _ snare top. I just would prefer that it says snare top. Same thing, I don't want it to be like 1 kick, 2 snare top. So this is just an OCD thing on my end, but I like to have the tracks named a certain way. From there, we will input the tempo into the session. If it's a fixed tempo, it's pretty straightforward. If there's a tempo map and it's changing, oftentimes we can get that information with a MIDI file, and we'll just drag that in and essentially import the tempo map, make sure that the multi-track and the rough mix all line up with it. And then I like to get the structure of the song mapped out with markers. I have some specific markers, so on top of having like verse, pre-chorus, chorus 1, I like to have a end marker and a start marker, and sometimes I like to have like a last hit marker. Yeah, so we have our own little system of how we like the markers, but the markers are so important to have the structure mapped out. I don't know what it is, but being able to visualize it helps me just mix the track in a really effective and efficient way. Another silly little pet peeve of mine is I don't like stereo audio tracks that have only mono information. So I just ask that we split the stereo tracks down to a single mono. It's just easier to work with for me. And then I wrote identify key and place as a marker at the session start. So E major. Boom, just like that. Okay, so moving on to drums here. And we have there's a gap here for a reason. This is if we receive acoustic drums that were recorded, someone actually played the drums, microphones, the whole deal. And then this is if we receive a MIDI file. So if someone just programmed the drums and sent us a MIDI file. If they recorded the drums, like I said, wide spectrum of quality. Sometimes you get some amazing drum recordings, and sometimes you get some really bad drum recordings, and that's just the reality of it. My job is to make everything sound good. Auto-align is a tool that I like to use, and if you are going to use it, you kind of have to use it at the start because it's going to micro-move everything around a little bit, and you want to make that decision and then before you do any sort of quantizing. So auto-align, and I leave that up to whoever's mix prepping to decide, if you put auto-align on it, does it make it sound better? Does it make it sound worse? If it's better, go with it. If you're not sure about it, leave it off and keep moving. I like to take the two mono overheads. Oftentimes, you get an overhead left or right, or overhead hi-hat side, overhead ride side. I like to put them on a stereo audio track, but it's important to take the panning into consideration. So I like to listen to music that's in drummer perspective. If I'm mixing something that's non-drummer perspective, it confuses the hell out of my brain. When you take the two mono files and put them on a stereo track, which I like to do because I like to process the overheads as one individual instrument, just ensure that you do it in a way that it's in drummer's perspective. Quantize drum performance based on what is appropriate for the production. So this is a little open-ended, and it needs to be because not every production is the same. Let's make an extreme example. Let's say I'm working on some metal album where everything needs to be quantized 100%. Well, then you quantize it 100%. But let's say I'm working on some punk track and everything is pushing and pulling together. Everything's around the grid. They played it to a click track, but they didn't edit anything. They recorded the drums, they got the best performance they could, and then they recorded the bass and the guitars on top of them. And if we were to quantize those drums, let's say 100%, it's now going to make the bass and guitar sound even more out of time. It's like you've shifted the foundation of the house. So you have to be intentional with your quantizing decisions. Thankfully, when I have Taylor mix prep stuff for me, he's a drummer, so he gets that on a deep level. So you have to assess what is going to serve this production best. Quantizing the drums is not the same thing every single time, and that's that. Okay. That will be a consistent theme as we go through the instruments here. What I like to do is I like to cut the bleed from the toms, the hi-hat, the ride, or any other spot mic. And by spot mic, I mean a splash microphone, or there's a microphone on the China or something, I don't know. And the reason being that specifically with toms, the low end that rings out on tom microphones is mix destroying. So I like to just cut that out, manually gate it up front instead of relying on a plugin to gate it, because I know if it's done this way, it's done with care and intention, and it's done right, and you never have to worry about it again. Same thing goes with the hi-hat and the ride. I find getting the hi-hat to sit in a mix or the ride to sit in the mix the way you want, you gotta turn it up and have it be audible. But when that hi-hat's not playing, you're getting so much ugly, crappy bleed. So it's important to cut it out, and that's why we do it. And then the next thing is I like to have velocity accurate MIDI of the shells created. And what I mean by that is, let's say we have an acoustic drum performance. I like to get a MIDI file of the kick performance, the snare performance, and the tom performance, and I want them to be velocity accurate. So if I use a drum sampler, when I'm creating a sample of the toms or the kick and snare, I want it to sound lively like the real drum performance. Now, sometimes you don't actually want it to be velocity accurate. Sometimes you want to elevate the drum performance. Let's say the drummer did a snare fill, but his intensity was kind of off. Well, you could actually change the velocity of the MIDI to be what the drummer probably would have wanted to play. Or let's say the drummer is really tired in the bridge of the song and he's just not hitting the snare as hard as he should. What would serve the production best is if he was hitting it as hard as he could. So you have to take those things into consideration. But for the most part, create velocity accurate MIDI of the shells. Let's say we're hired to mix a track, but they just program the drums. Every single drum sampler has a different MIDI map, so it's important to convert the drum MIDI performance to the MIDI map of the drum sampler that we're going to be using. The other thing is every single drum sampler, velocities react differently. So once you get the map lined up and you press play, you'll notice that the velocities aren't recreating this performance the exact same way. The ghost notes might be off, the intensities of things might be messed up. So you have to go through and you have to suss out the MIDI velocity drum dynamics to function appropriately with the designated sampler. So we'll just agree on whatever go-to sampler we want to use for the production and then listen through the velocities. Oftentimes when people program the drums, there's a lot of what I call guitar player program drums. So the drums don't sound realistic. So that's why we have the step in here to suss out the MIDI velocity, and it can mean just making sure that the dynamics translate from sampler to sampler, or it could be changing things, maybe even rewriting things. Sometimes we make some pretty bold decisions. So that is it for drums. Let's move on to the bass. So we have assess bass performance based on what is appropriate for the production. That is what it is. Again, it's one of those open-ended things being listen to the bass. What are you hearing? What is wrong? And then if there's something wrong, how do we remedy that? I have if bad replaced with MIDI. This isn't a great solution all the time, but it can work well in different types of productions where the bass really isn't the focus and it's just under the guitars and the guitars are blaring the whole time. And you'll get a much cleaner production this way because your low end is just like tight and there isn't a mess. Other times, I am not afraid to retrack the bass. Re-recording bass doesn't take very long. If we are using the bass performance that's provided, I like to check the bass tuning. I am always impressed with how well Melodyne handles bass tuning, especially if you're dealing with a bass part where like the bass player is playing all up the neck. The bass is in tune, but maybe it's not intonated very well. So as they move up the fretboard, it starts to pull sharp or whatnot. It's important to address the bass tuning. And then same thing with the timing. This is just like the drum timing. You don't want to just haphazardly be like, make everything perfectly in time. You want to listen, use your ears, trust your ears. If something is distractingly out of time, fix that. If the bass is making it so the production doesn't sound tight, fix that. But if you're not hearing anything wrong, get your dirty hands off the bass. Manually gate any unwanted dead space. I know for myself, I like to compress the living hell out of the bass. And let's say there's a bass part that's like da-na-na, da-na-na, right? There's like a gap between it. I like to manually gate that so that when I compress it and there's that gap, I'm not just pulling up the noise floor. It's really important that your bass is really tight and really clean. That's a really important part of getting a great mix. So that's what we like to do. We like to cut out any unwanted dead space, and that's that. Okay, so let's move on to guitars here. We have assess performance based on what is appropriate for the production, which is the same thing we wrote down for the bass here. And then I have, if bad, get really upset. What I mean by that is you have two options. One, if the guitar performance is not good, and what that can mean is it's not played very well, it's really out of time, or it's really out of tune. Like a guitar, you have like 6 strings generally. There's a lot of ways you can mess it up. So you can either approach the client and say, hey, these guitars are significantly going to hinder my ability to do a quality job mixing this. So would it be possible to retract them? And if so, could we hop on a call and I can give you some pointers on how to get the best performance so we can essentially get a better performance than this? If you just tell them to like retract the guitars, they'll most likely give you exactly what you were given. So that wouldn't be very productive. So you got to like tell them exactly what you want. Or if it's a simple part and you're feeling good, maybe you just retrack it. Done that a bunch and usually gets the job done and no feelings are hurt. So do whatever you got to do to make sure that the guitars are good. Going back to what I said at the top of this video, saying that the files provided, the performances, the way it was recorded, and the arrangement dramatically influence your ability to create a quality and competitive mix master. And in the event that the guitars do work, you want to address any timing, same thing with the bass, just listen. If something bothers you, fix it. If nothing bothers you, don't touch it. And then manually gate any unwanted dead space. And just, do a once over at the ends of notes and stuff. Make sure that there's nothing weird happening or no unwanted noises. That's it for guitars. Okay, so let's move on to vocals here. We have cut dead space around vocals. Yeah, goes without saying. You're singing la 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 la, space, la 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 la. Cut out that space because just like bass, often vocals are heavily compressed, especially in a dense like rock mix, and you don't want any of that noise in your production. It's that simple. You just don't want it. So get rid of that. Address vocal tuning. This is just like quantizing the drums or quantizing bass or guitar. You have to do it tastefully. You have to do it with intention, and you have to understand the context. Not every production needs crazy auto-tune, but some productions, that's exactly what they're going for. You have to understand how to approach that, because that's a make or break. The vocals are like the most important part of every production. You have to make sure that you do this right. So address the vocal tuning. If something is distracting and it's annoying you, okay, fix it. If it's not, don't worry about it. And then same thing with vocal timing. What we'll do when we're mix prepping is just go through the lead vocal. And if there's anything that's distracting, we like to just kind of like nudge it around. And then when it comes to the backup vocals, you can essentially decide, you can use like a tool like Vocal Line and lock them all up together and make everything perfectly in time, which can sound really great for a production where you want everything to be really tight. So then I have set up vocal send for processing. This is a Corey specific mixing thing. I like to have the vocals set up a certain way so I can run through my 1176. And then at the very end, I have quality control. Give the production a listen from start to finish to ensure nothing has been missed. That's self-explanatory. So from there, I should receive a Pro Tools session where there is a saved as file called mix prep, and in there the drums have been addressed, the bass has been addressed, guitars have been addressed, and the vocals have been addressed, all in a way that I can start carving out the drum sound, carving out the bass sound. Let's say all the guitars are recorded DI. I can start dialing in the guitar tones without worrying about things being out of tune or out of time, and then I can go ahead, slam the vocals through my 1176, apply whatever settings I think the vocals need, and the track is mixed. That's it. So there you go. That is my mix prep checklist. What do you think about it? Do you think it's cool? Did you learn something? Did you like it? Is there something I should add to it? Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you like videos like this? I think these are the best videos because these are like real videos. I'm not just being like, yo, here's another plugin. Check it out. It's like, this is what I do. This is what I do. Can you believe it? Okay. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Corey Bergeron. You're watching Corey Bergeron Recording. It's 2024 right now. See ya.